Yes, we are recording now. It is 4:03. Welcome to the Downtown Management Commission meeting. It's Tuesday, July 11th, 2023, and I will call roll. Susan Newsom, here. Ron Puddle.
Here.
Stephanie Trees. Not here at the moment. She may be joining later. And Justin Calvin. And I'll turn the meeting over to our chair for procedural items.
So first procedural item is approval of the May 9th, 2023 minutes. If there's any comments, I would move to approve the minutes.
I'll second that.
They are approved. Do we have, moving on to the next item, do we have any public here on the call?
I am not seeing any members of the public.
Great, so we will move through that. And next we have the update on the homeless day shelter.
Thanks, and we have Megan Newton, who is joining us from Housing and Human Services to provide you all an update on their work.
Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Megan Newton. I work for Housing and Human Services with the City of Boulder, and I'm the policy advisor on homelessness. And the Day Service Center has been one of the projects that I've been working on. So I'll give you a little background of how we got where we are and hope to be going. In January 2022, at the council's retreat, they identified a Day Service Center as one of their priorities. So since that time, we've been working in this direction. We did some community outreach and to get some information from both folks in the community, service providers working in this sphere, as well as folks with lived experience, to kind of get a feel for what folks wanted to see in this space. We did that back in almost a year ago now, in September 2022. We then put out an RFP to get a service provider to provide services to operate the space late last year, December 2022, and we did not get a response to that RFP from a service provider. So early this year, there's a leadership change at the Boulder shelter, and they expressed some interest. And so since that time, we've been working with them to determine if they would be able to operate the space. We're currently with them working on a contract. So we're moving forward as far as that goes. And I'm sure you all have heard we identified a location at 1844 Folsom that's currently an office building that we will use as is. Well, we'll do some minor renovations of it this summer to use as is, but the long-term plan is that the site gets redeveloped. So they will knock the building down that is currently there and then rebuild a purpose-built day center space on the first floor with, I want to say, up to 50 units of permanent supportive housing above it. So I think that's 2 floors. I could be wrong on that. And so we're working through that process now. There's going to be, the hope is that we have, well, let me back up a little. The goal of the center is two kind of parallel tracks. One, to meet folks' basic needs, things like a shower, place to store their stuff, to charge their phone, to get out of the weather, to get their mail. So things like that, as well as being a one-stop shop to connect with service providers. So providers that are currently providing navigation or case management services to folks, help them get into housing, to help them connect to benefits, to help them to connect to mental health or substance use services. So have them all housed in one. Not that they won't currently be doing stuff they're already doing, but to add to theirs, they'll be in this space. And so folks can be directed. And so they're not bouncing all over town, go here for this, go there for that. This space, the goal is to have it all under one roof. And so folks can be directed to one place to be able to meet their needs. It will only operate during the day with the goal to link people to Boulder Shelter to spend the night there. So that's the goal, with the primary goal of not only meeting people's basic needs, but connecting them to housing, ending their homeless episode and getting them in a place where their long-term needs are met. Where we currently are in this process is we are working with the current owner to get a lease in place. And so we can go in there and make some minor renovations, add a shower, add a bathroom, those kind of things, take down a couple walls to make the site serviceable as is. They have to go through a process to get some funding in place that would take approximately 18 months, maybe 24 months. So we'll use it as is for that time. And then we'll have to find a secondary space while they're doing the renovations, probably 2025, 2026, and then move back in after they're done.
So does that hold up a funding issue or just a scheduling another issue?
Well, when we were originally doing this design, it was a day center. And so if we were just doing the day center, I don't think we have this issue, but with the opportunity to add housing to the project, that's where they have to get the funding. They have to get tax credits and stuff in line from the state to develop the 50 units of housing above it. So that's the holdup as far as that goes. The city is not funding we're providing some funding towards that, but primarily not. And so they have to get the state funding and other things in line in order
That's
to
like
do
a
that.
scale of like $1 million or something to do those updates.
Oh, to develop the housing, this is kind of out of my wheelhouse, so I wouldn't be able to tell, but it's much more than that, I would assume, to develop that amount of housing. And so where we are at 1844 Folsom is we're working with Boulder Shelter to develop the contract. And then we will work with Boulder Shelter to do good neighbor meetings for folks for both the condo, for anybody is technically, I think, within 600 feet, but also we aren't going to be checking people's addresses when we have the meetings to we've already had preliminary meetings with the condos next door and the dairy center they've asked a lot of questions. And so we're working with them to answer their questions, and rightfully so, there are concerns with bringing this kind of service into the neighborhood. And so trying to work with them to help with that and to, also develop our management plan. What are your concerns and what can we do to address them? And so that our hope is to have those good neighbor meetings probably in August or September, with the ultimate goal to have the space open before the weather turns. So we're shooting for October. We have a lot of moving parts currently. So if we can get all the stars to align, October is our goal date. So when winter comes, we do have a day center space available to folks. That is kind of like a huge nutshell. So I'm definitely open to questions because we have had quite a few. So I'm hopefully have an answer. Sure.
Megan, will there be transportation between the shelter and back again?
I believe that is the plan. As I think you guys probably are aware, they have a bus that they contract with VIA that takes people up there and back. So yes, the conversation is, do we provide funding to add a stop to that shelter? So yes, there will be some sort of transportation, and the details have not yet been determined. I think in a perfect world, maybe it's there and back, but again, we're having a lot of conversations with the neighborhood, so it may be just adding a stop. But yes, we would provide transportation.
Okay, good, thanks.
And something I think I forgot to mention, some of the community services that are already out there that we're trying to bring into the space are things like Deacon's Closet that had been operating Grace Commons, but now that space is being redeveloped. And so we're trying to bring those folks to the day center. They have a Lamps breakfast on Thursday morning, community table that serves meals. And so we're having those conversations now with service providers on what can we bring into the space? What would folks be willing to do? Some of it is a very nice fit. They're looking for a space and we're looking for the services. But like the conversations around mental health services and substance use services, those are two to be determined, because we would probably add those services in the community. And so there's a cost that comes with that. So we're trying to work that out. Any other questions?
For me,
The DMC is in, we've discussed this before, the DMC is in high support of this. And we'll actually be talking about it later in our session today about some other details that we can do for safety issues and stuff like that. So
Awesome.
thank you for all your efforts. And sounds like, I guess my final question is like, there's no major hurdles. It's just process now that needs to
Right.
happen, but
It's-
nothing that's going to stop it.
Shouldn't be, no, that site doesn't have to go up for planning board or council. It's a staff approval, so the shelter will have to submit an operations plan, and as long as it meets all the things it needs to meet, the staff would, no reason it won't get approved. So no, it is it's a process. Do we have to go through the good neighbor process? We need to get a contract, we need to start hiring people, that kind of thing. Is the process in the renovations we're doing, but no, there shouldn't be anything that holds it up.
You'll have to get a building permit,
For when they redevelop it, correct?
not for this original work.
Again, let me not speak out because I will not be in charge of doing renovations, but I don't know that anything we're doing is significant enough to require that, but it may be that we'll have to pull a permit. I don't.
Yeah, I think that you have to get
definitely
one.
Not my.
I think if you have to get one to do anything, and that takes forever, so best of luck.
Thanks.
You might know some people in the city.
That's the hope, I think.
If only that made a difference.
Yes, it's only the opposite, right?
Well, great, Megan, thank you for joining us today. I do appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank
This is
you.
exciting. So moving on to the Downtown Boulder Partnership, Anna, I see you're here, and you and I were exchanging emails earlier today. I
Yeah.
need to get you paint.
You need to get some paint, get that graffiti removed. Thanks so much. So hi, everybody. I'm Anna Salim. For those of you I don't know, I'm the Vice President of Operations and Programming for the Downtown Boulder Partnership. And have a little bit from everybody for you. So I will get started. Stop me at any point with questions. Just interrupt me and ask your questions. As most of you know, our CEO, Chip, is leaving us. His last day is July 21st. We're having a going away for him at Bands on the Bricks on July 19th. So please come by 5:30 p.m. and say hi and bye to Chip. The transition plan is well underway. The job is posted through July 21st. And we're receiving some good candidates so far. We're hoping to make an offer by September 1st. Terry Takata Smith, our Vice President of Marketing Communications, will be our interim CEO after Chip's departure. And on that note, we'll talk about the branding. So our downtown branding campaign is in full swing, and we're seeing really great results with our online campaign, which we like because we can track that information. That's really helpful. Our engagement on those is well over industry standards. So that is something we always like to see. And that campaign runs through August. And then there's a little bit of a break, and then we get back on air for the holidays. We do things on Connected TV, KD, VR TV, 5280 Magazine, podcast, paid social, and a variety of other online and digital campaigns. Event marketing is busier than ever. I'll talk a little bit more about our events here at the end, but we've been doing all the marketing for all of that as well. Just a few new businesses that are coming soon. Up West is moving into the 1400 block of Pearl Street Mall. Teton Gravity just opened, also on the 1400 block. Saucy Cluckers is a new restaurant. They've got kind of odd hours and days, but they're over on Broadway, just south of Pearl. And Next Door has closed. So that's our update on businesses. Any questions from anybody yet? Keep going. Our public policy committee met with Brad Mueller from planning and with CU leadership to learn a little bit more about the process for planning connections between all of the things they're building up there on the hill and downtown. There's a lot of excitement and anticipation, and we're just watching for the next steps on all of that. Our Clean and Safe program, Downtown Ambassador program, is going really well. Our current operations manager, Brandon Lowe, is also leaving us. His last day is also July 21st. We keep joking that he and Chip must be running away together.
Ooh, we just muted. You just got muted somehow.
I don't know. Chip must have been overhearing my joking about running away. I just got a confirmation that I'm allowed to share today that our new operations manager, her name is Chelsea Blake. She'll be joining us. She starts on July 24th. Luckily, I have an amazing team lead in Lexi Treadway. She's kind of keeping things running in that little transition period. And yeah, we're really looking forward to having Chelsea join us. I think it's going to be great. We are kind of expanded in April our commitment to the Hill through a partnership with CU. And one of our leads who has been downtown for a long time with us, James, is going to be moving up to lead the Hill. Basically, we have a full-time team lead up there, plus an additional 32 hours a week cleaning. And between James and Paul, who does the cleaning, they're doing a great job. Mostly I hear from folks in parking services about it, and they say it's never looked cleaner up there. So we're really pleased with all of that. And we have a meeting with CU and Chris and others, I think the 26th, to just check in on that program and see how it's going and what else we can do. We're also working with the city with utilities to talk a little bit more about our standard operating procedure for lost and abandoned property. We have more and more issues with people leaving like kind of odd, large things like shopping carts and strangely a electric fireplace out in the middle of the mall and not a clear direction or path from the city with, can I just take this? Like, what do I do with this? So we're close to finishing that process. I think we'll have some pretty clear direction about what we can and cannot do. And hopefully we're hoping to kind of ramp up our ability to just get things off the mall and just make that space clean and welcoming, which is our goal. We continue to have a lot of concerns on that block in particular, 1300 block, about bathrooms, the electrical outlets. But those are ongoing conversations that we're having. And then on events, Bands on the Bricks is going strong. We did have to cancel the one right after the 4th of July, but it kind of worked out well. The band is available for our rain date, which is August 9th. So we're just extending one more week. This weekend is our Pearl Street Arts Fest. It runs Friday, Saturday, and Sunday this year. And that's looking to be a great show this weekend. We're doing a lot of extra stuff in conjunction with Community Vitality and also through the Downtown Streets as Public Spaces program. So alongside Community Vitality, we're doing an outdoor movie series. We did the first one on the West End in June. It was rainy, but pretty well attended considering how rainy it was. We got 50 people out to watch Top Gun, and that was a lot of fun. That was in conjunction with the West End Mile. We're doing another one this week on Thursday in conjunction with the East End Mile. We're going to be showing 6 short films from community filmmakers. We partnered with the Boulder County Film Commission, and they got really different films, which is really exciting. It's everything from a film that's been going around festivals to a little heist movie that some kids at New Vista put together, and they're all really fun. So if you are available Thursday night, head to the East End. It's on 16th Street north of Pearl, and the filmmakers will all be there for Q&A as well after their movies. So that'll be really a nice night.
What time does it start?
It'll probably be 8:45, but it gets dark enough. I would estimate between 8:30 and 8:45. And then the Boulder Social Streets, which is part of the Downtown Streets as Public Space program, has been going well. We've had our first big event, Rollerpalooza, which was, given it was the first time and everything else, we thought it was really well attended. We were really happy with how it turned out, and we're moving on. Next week, we're going to be doing Dancing in the Streets, which if you haven't had a chance to go and look, it's bouldersocialstreets.com. I am every day impressed with what my team put together for that. We've got everything from learning the Lindy Hop and salsa to like belly dancing and Persian dance. I mean, it's just a cool variety of stuff. People can come and learn these dances and then stick around and dance the night away over there on 13th Street. And then at the end of the month, we're going to be doing a Picnic on the Pavement, which is on July 30th. And then August 4th, we'll have Yappy Hour, which we're really excited about just because of the name. It's fun. And there's a couple more big events in August as well. The Boulder Soccer Street Classic is August 13th. And then the Melon and Funk Festival is August 25th.
I had a question on those events. I know the DMC is just very enthusiastic about all the things that you're doing over by the on 13th there. Right, yeah. How is it being measured? Like, you mentioned how the movie had 50 people there and you were happy with that. Like, I can understand like rain and stuff like that. What analytics are you measuring? And it's always good to set goals ahead of time, because then if you met your goal, instead of like looking back and saying, oh, we're happy with that. It's like, we want this to have 75 people. Or are there any questionnaires or anything being done to measure it?
So kind of alongside with that program, the city partnered with GAL and Leadline to do some more data collection. So they've been doing that. I think, if I remember correctly, I think we already got results back from Leadline on what they at Rollerpalooza, what they were managed to, glean from people. But they're asking questions. They're trying to figure out where people are coming from. They're trying to ask questions around how people think about using public space like a street. Do they want to see more festivals like that? Do they want to see it used in different ways? Some more straightforward, simple placemaking, or how do they see using those kinds of public spaces? And so they're working on all of those questions and collecting that information as we go. We'll also collect data on how many people come, and it's always really hard to know with an event. I think with Rollerpalooza, we estimate there were 250 people, which was kind of what we thought it would be. And part of that is Boulder Social Streets being brand new, and also it was the first one, so word is spreading slowly about all of those things. When your marketing only just starts right before something happens, it sometimes takes a little while to get going. So we'll be looking at that data, just what's our estimated attendance. We'll also be looking at mobility data, so we have access to data that shows us where are people coming from, what percentage of them live in the community versus are coming from other places, age information, kind of some demographic information. So we'll look at that as well, and we'll pull together a whole report for the city. I think it's due at the end of November, so there'll be a full report on all of those things. And then a little bit more anecdotally, our team is looking at what are the kinds of things that the community seems to really be excited about. People are really excited about Rollerpalooza, but it was a pretty small group. And I think it's a longer conversation of like, was it a small group because they just didn't find out about it in time? Or it definitely seemed to us like this is the kind of thing that could be done more. People would probably really enjoy it and show up for it. The value proposition versus the cost of it might be something that is a longer conversation, right? It's not inexpensive to close the street and to do all of the things. I don't know. I don't have the final figures on what it costs, but for 250 people, the price per person was pretty high.
Since they close that street twice a week for the farmers market, I guess I'm intrigued to understand what is that cost. And
yeah, and I mean, really, we sort of conscientiously and thoughtfully we've globbed onto the farmers market closure. All of our events either happen on Friday or on Sunday, and it's because we're closing it and then keeping it closed, or we're keeping it closed and then doing the event, right? It definitely helps with the cost, but there's still a lot of costs, right? And not necessarily just around the street closure, but just the event itself, staffing, everything else, right? So I think our full report will include a really detailed version of all of that, so you can really dig into what does it cost when you do something like this.
Do you know roughly when that report might come out?
So the Boulder Social Streets one will come to y'all the end of November. Partially, we wanted to hold a little bit because the mobility data is really delayed, so to get that kind of information. And then for the other programs like Opry Street Fest and the cinema stuff, we're working on those kind of as quickly as we can. We would have gotten them done sooner had we not added Boulder Social Streets, but the Opry Street Fest report is probably going to be done by the end of this month.
Susan, Justin, anything else?
All set here.
I think I'm good. Don't let Chip leave.
We're going to miss him. Thank you all so much. I might stay as a fly on the wall for a little bit, but let me know if you need anything else.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Anna.
Thanks, Anna.
So moving right along, we have the consent agenda. I personally didn't have anything in that section of the packet to review or question. Susan or Justin, anything?
Nothing there.
Great, then moving along to the fund financials. And I had a question, Chip, between what this would be versus in section 9, the 2024 budget, which where it starts on page 17 in the PDF, the packet. I assume that's more for the 2024 budget. I didn't really understand how the fund financials differed from the budget section.
So the fund financials are the documents that I'm providing on a bi-monthly basis for all of the DMC meetings to show you what the historic has been and where we stand to date for 2023. And then the 2024 budget proposal that we'll get into here shortly is actually the proposal that's going out for the 2024 budget year. So it's basically
Okay.
a shot of where we stand today versus where we're moving towards in the future.
I just want to make sure that we saw it in the packet. I don't remember seeing that in the packet.
It is right after the budget memo in the packet.
It's the one that's sideways.
It's, I believe it's page 21. of the-
21, okay.
And then the memo before it is the 2024 proposal.
Great. So that's where I did have, the numbers don't always match consistently between 2023 in the page 17 and the 2023 in the page 21. Maybe that's because it's one's budget and one's actuals. No, that wouldn't be it. But like operating expenses or personnel were like, they had different numbers. And I don't know that I made specific notes as to that. Not a huge deal, because really I'm more concerned about like what the budget is for the future, but things just didn't always agree number-wise.
And there's a chance what you may be seeing, and I can dive into this, is it may be that the revised budget is what's being shown on the fund financial document versus the initial approved. So any of the encumbered carryover that's coming from the next year would cause a discrepancy there, but I'm happy to dive into that and send out some information through Lisa.
Cool. I just remember it was an expense. One of the expenses, they didn't jive. And I can't remember, without spending more time going side by side, they weren't the same.
Okay, I can take a look at that and get back with you.
Cool. Not a major issue. It was just interesting when I was trying to like do some analysis of it. Anyone else have anything on fund financials?
I had a question about operating uses of funds. The big jump between 2022 and 2023.
And so you're looking at the
I'm looking at this one.
Yeah, so the biggest thing that you're seeing there is the 2022 estimate is what was actually expensed. And then 2023 approved budget is going to include the assumption that we're using the full allocation of those EcoPass dollars. And where that contract has come in lower than we anticipated, you're starting to see the discrepancy. So we're working on trying to have a plan, kind of a contingency plan as we move forward. Because unfortunately, we don't get those EcoPass contract dollar amounts until after their budget's approved. And then we're looking to repurpose some of those dollars. So that's the biggest thing that you're seeing is the difference between the actual versus what the budget is.
That makes sense. That's a big number, I know. Oh, and retiring the debts on the St. Julian's gonna make a huge
It
difference.
really is.
That's awesome. The fund balance is gonna be, if the budget stays the way it's supposed to, it's gonna be crazy big again, which is nice. I mean, going from 2019 to 2023, it's $10 million. I am always worried that the city's gonna say, "We want some of that money back." But has that ever happened, or do you think that would happen?
So, and I'll let Chris speak to this, but my understanding is because it is a unique mill levy that's associated with the general improvement district, it is earmarked
They
for
can't.
our fund.
Let's spend some money.
We're working on it.
And speaking of the eco passes, I know that one of our goals is to be mindful that we're working towards less car use and things like that. I assume that any reallocation of the eco pass budget is going to be considered kind of temporary. We're working towards getting that back into the eco pass program, right?
Absolutely. And in addition to that, building upon options, so looking at is there a better platform to get out to the public so that they can find those different mobility options, whether it's through Commutify, through different pilot programs that we can explore. So keeping that purpose. Because
I'd say that's part of our budget conversation on the later on.
Later on. Yes. Cool.
Well, thank you for providing that. I do appreciate it. If there's no other mention here, let's move on to the public hearing on the gateless garage fees additional analysis. We have 45 minutes allocated for this, and if I do the math throughout the whole time allocated, we are beyond our time allocated for the actual meeting. So if we can do this in quickly, I don't know that we need to spend that much time. I think we just need to go back through scenario 1 and 2. I don't think we need to do a lot of discussion on this.
Yeah, I think 45 minutes is way more than what we need.
So yeah, we have Sam Bromberg here. I am seeing Taisha Adams. Not sure if they're here for the public hearing, but how about first Sam can do her presentation. We'll ask for any clarifying questions from the Downtown Management Commission. And if there are any attendees who are wanting to speak to the proposed changes, we can move into that. We have 45 minutes in case a lot of people showed up for a public hearing, but certainly showed it up. So Sam, over to you.
Sure. Lisa, can you enable sharing? Right. Thanks for having me back tonight. If you'll recall, the last time we spoke about the gateless transition back on the May 9th, we spoke on May 9th at the May 9th meeting. At that time, DMC motioned to adopt the staff recommendation for KG to reduce the cost of the first hour parking in the garages by 49 cents to partially offset the introduction of the new transaction fees of the gateless system, with additional analysis of the implications for also reducing the cost of the 3-for-3 product to fully offset the transaction fees for that product. Since my last presentation, staff have fully executed a contract with Metropolis and are ready to present our findings on the 3-for-3 product subsidy. As a reminder from our last conversation, installation of the new gateless system will result in changes both for customers utilizing the garages as well as for Community Vitality Department operations. There are both savings and expenses associated with the change. Some of the savings include the cost of operating and maintaining the current gates, the physical tickets and RFID cards, the 24/7 on-call customer service as well. Some of the expenses associated with the new system include the installation fees, new signage, additional customer service and enforcement support for education, marketing, and communications, and maintenance of our parking guidance system that we'll be installing. The biggest change for users will be the associated transaction fee that Metropolis charges for utilization of their fee-based platform. That's detailed on the top of the slide. The fees associated with the transactions for both transient or occasional users and permits. On the left side, I have the current pricing in the garage, and on the right, the pricing with the new Metropolis transaction fees. And this should be a reminder from our last talk. At our last discussion in May, staff presented a financial analysis to understand the implications of Metropolis transaction fee on top of the city's current parking rate structure. The analysis evaluated various options for adjusting the price of garage parking to potentially offset a portion of the transaction fees for users. At that meeting, the DMC motioned to lower the cost of the first hour parking by 49 cents, which city staff had recommended as the most revenue neutral option with potential for revenue growth in future years. Scenario one represents the original staff proposal. DMC then directed staff to conduct additional analysis on the 3-for-3 product to determine the financial implication of fully subsidizing the transaction fee on the product, in addition to the adopted change for the first hour of parking. Scenario 2 represents the new proposal with the approved subsidy on the first hour of parking, and then the first full subsidy on the 3-for-3 product, full being 99 cents. Which is the transaction fee. When staff analyzed the financial implications of scenario 2, we determined that it is likely to create a revenue deficit in the first year. However, that deficit should close after the first year with further opportunity for revenue growth in subsequent years. Based on discussion in May, staff are recommending the adoption of scenario 2. Next steps for the project involve preparing a comprehensive communications plan to notify the public of the coming change, installing and testing the cameras to ensure functionality, transition our permit holders onto the new Metropolis platform, installing signage in the garages, and finally raising the gates and transitioning to the Metropolis platform on October 1st. So the questions for the Downtown Management Commission are, does DMC have any questions or feedback about the proposed next steps for the gateless implementation? And does DMC support staff's recommendation of adopting scenario 2 and lowering the cost of the 3 p.m. to 3 a.m. garage product by 99 cents? At this time, staff can answer questions. We'll move to the public hearing, and then finally DMC can discuss the 2 bottom questions and move to make a motion.
So first, would we have questions or would we move to public hearing if there's any public here?
First, clarifying questions from the commission in advance of the public hearing. And then once we've had a chance to hear from anybody who wants to speak on these topics, then you have an opportunity to vote and discuss and let us know what you think.
So I know Stephanie had some strong feelings about this, and she's not here right now, so I want to keep her thoughts in mind. But Susan and Justin, do you have any questions?
I don't have questions, but thank you for doing this extra work.
If there are no questions, then we can move to the public hearing. If there are any members of the public that wish to speak on the proposed change listed in this second question for DMC, please raise your hand. Not seeing any hands raised in Zoom. There does not seem to be any desired public comment on this topic.
I was kind of going either way on this one. I did not have a strong opinion on this one. Before we just strictly vote, does Susan and Justin, do you have a feeling towards scenario 1 or scenario 2, the original recommendation or this update?
I mean, I prefer this update. I think that's what we talked at length about before, and I don't think that the analysis has changed that opinion for me, at least. So
Yeah, I agree with Justin. I felt strongly about this new scenario changing the 3 for 3. So I'm quite happy with it.
Great. And so they can just move straight into vote to keep things moving here. Does the DMC support adoption of scenario 2? Susan, aye. Renee?
And just to be formal in the minutes, if we could have a formal motion, and Sam has suggested a motion on screen right now.
Cool. Because I've only got, I'm looking at the version in the packet. So there we go. DMC, I move that the DMC moves to adopt the staff recommendation for CAGID to reduce the cost of the 3 p.m. to 3 a.m. Product in garages by 99 cents to offset the Metropolis transaction fees.
Second,
Roll call.
We have a second, so now just a vote and we can move on.
Aye. Susan?
you're in favor?
Yes. I think we have a unanimous vote. From the
Yes.
We're all in
Commissioners.
favor. We're all in favor.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you so much. We will have that reflected in the meeting minutes and we will move forward with the scenario 2 pricing strategy.
Thank you.
Thanks to the staff for working on that. I do appreciate it. So now we have matters from staff, the first one being the budget.
Actually, no, there is a addition to the agenda. So Chris Haglund is here before we get into the budget to provide an update to DMC on Lime scooter expansion.
Yeah.
There was an updated packet that got sent out, but maybe you were quickly, Mr. Chair, downloaded and printed the original agenda.
I
So
may have or saved the wrong one. My apologies. Were there many pages to it or is it just in the agenda?
Oh,
There are no
go ahead.
There aren't any documents, just the addition to the agenda.
Okay, thank you.
Just
Chris, go
just
ahead.
a few slides I'd like to share. And I do need permission to share my screen.
all right, have at it.
All right, let's see. Where is it? Not too many windows open. There it is. All right. You see the presentation slide now?
Yep.
All right, thank you. So thank you for adding me to your agenda. My name is Chris Haglund. I'm a principal planner in the Transportation Mobility Department, and I'd like to provide you with an update on the Lime scooter expansion plan that we've been working on. So if you remember back in January of this year, city staff presented to City Council on January 5th our evaluation of the Lime scooter pilot. When we adopted the new micro mobility program in the city of Boulder, scooters were included in part of that program, but they were only allowed to operate east of 28th Street in a one-year pilot program. So after that pilot program was finished, city staff presented to council the results of that. And following that meeting, council supported the expansion citywide of the Lime scooter program. And so we have been in the process over the last several months of basically working with Lime to determine how we will roll out that expansion citywide, and then how are we going to use the different tools that are available to us to effectively manage both the operation of the scooters and their parking. We know that this is going to be an iterative process. It's going to be a phased process. You know, in the past, a lot of these scooter programs were just dumped on cities and they just appeared everywhere. And there was a lot of issues with clutter and operations. We have been very diligent in working with Lime over the past several months to develop a plan for how we're going to roll out this project. And I wanted to share with you kind of what we're proposing at this point for the downtown. There are a number of different geofencing technologies that are at our disposal to help manage the program. And some of those include no-go zones. So these are areas where scooters are not allowed to operate. If a scooter user does cross that geofence, the scooter will slowly come to a stop and they will not be allowed to operate. So there are many different areas around the city that are no-go zones. For example, the Pearl Street Mall, we don't allow any wheels on the Pearl Street Mall. That is a no-go zone. Traditionally, Lime also has no-go zones in cemeteries, in some public parks, including like ball fields. All our open space and mountain park trails will be excluded from Lime use. So they use this technology to just say, this is where scooters cannot go. There are also zones, geofence zones, that are slow zones. These are areas in which the maximum speed of the scooter is reduced from 15 miles an hour to 8 miles an hour. And it's a slow transition to that. So we've identified a number of areas where we'd like to see slow zones happen. The most important thing is our mandatory parking zones. These are geofenced areas in which when a scooter user enters the geofenced area that is a mandatory parking zone, if they try to stop their ride and park their scooter, they will be told that they are within a geofenced area and they need to park their scooter in a specific location. And those are designated parking areas, which we call lime groves. And you can see a picture here of a lime grove on the street, generally a bright green rectangle with delineators. Sometimes there is vertical signage or for wayfinding, but for the most part, it is paint and delineators. And so we have been looking at where are we going to have these mandatory parking zones? And certainly the downtown is going to be a big mandatory parking zone where people will not be allowed to park their scooters anywhere. They will be in designated locations. We've identified some areas that we're proposing, and these are going to go through our permitting process. They are generally associated with B-cycle stations, so really to create micromobility hubs and also transit stations, and to make sure that there's an adequate amount of parking areas in each of these mandatory parking zones. Another mandatory parking zone in the city will be on University Hill. And then it looks like CU will have their whole main campus be a mandatory parking zone, where you'll see lime groves dispersed to manage and control the parking. So for the downtown specifically, the Pearl Street Mall is a no-go. So these 4 rectangles represent the geofences that will be put up so that scooters will not be allowed to operate at all on the Pearl Street Mall, just as though we allow no wheels on the Pearl Street Mall, and it's a dismount zone. But the technology will help enforce that. Slow zones, right now we've proposed a slow zone on 13th Street. We know there's a lot of pedestrian crossing on 13th Street. It's where we have the contraflow bike lane, and we have some significant vehicle traffic. So we thought if a scooter's operating in this area, this would also be a slow zone. We're also considering any other street that crosses the Pearl Street Mall to be a slow zone. So certainly you can provide your input on that. But right now we thought this would be the most important slow zone due to the amount of traffic, both pedestrian and vehicular and bicycle on the 13th Street area. Now, in terms of the mandatory parking zone, we're creating a very large geographical area that will be geofenced so that anybody ending their trip within this square would be required to park it in a designated parking area. This is done, as I said, we'll do this also on University Hill as well, because we know that parking of the scooters and clutter associated with them is one of the #1 issues that was discussed with our public engagement and with city council and our boards and commissions. So we want to effectively control that, remove the clutter aspect, and really park these nice and neat in areas that will be also multimodal micromobility hubs. And so for the downtown right now, we've identified about 20 lime groves, the yellow pinpoints, where we would want to have a lime grove in. Now, again, this is an iterative process. We're going to learn by looking at data and understanding where demand is, where trips are being stopped, and where we need to have these. But at this point, Lime has gone out with city staff, looked at the whole area of the downtown and determined that these are possible areas where we'd want to paint a lime grove. We are looking at locations that are only above curb. We are not looking at any locations that would be below curb on the street or taking a parking space or anything like that. These would all be above ground. We are still in the process of reviewing those locations. Once we have the permit applications and the exact locations and what they look like, we can certainly share that information with the commission as we go to move forward, and of course, prior to any installation. But for us, the most important thing is that we effectively manage both the operation of the scooters and the parking, so we avoid those issues with clutter, but we also provide a great new multimodal way to access businesses in the downtown without driving a single occupant vehicle. Just to give you a little bit of context, currently in the pilot program, they had 288 scooters operating east of 28th Street. With the expansion citywide, their geographic area is about tripling. And so we are right now negotiating with Lime what a final number of scooters that will be deployed on launch date. So that's an ongoing negotiation. We really want it data driven. Basically, Lime has to achieve certain triggers and thresholds in order to increase the size of their fleet, or if they're underperforming, we can actually have scooters taken out of the system as well. So those are all in place in the agreement. And then they are really hoping to have a launch of the citywide expansion to correspond with CU students coming back in late August. We're not sure if we'll be able to make that based on everything we have to do in terms of actually taking their proposed locations, approving them, and then installing those. So that certainly is a process that's going to take a few weeks for the approval and the installation of those. But that's where we are now, and I really just wanted to provide an update and receive any feedback from the commission that we can use as we finalize our plans and return to you with more details on actual locations. These are really just proposed locations based on their demand analysis. But thank you.
Chris, I have a comment.
Sure.
In terms of the lime groves, I would like to see them throughout the entire district. As Anna said, around this building seems important, also around Boulder High. It seems like they're definitely.
And the library.
Mm-hmm. So you would propose an expansion of the actual geo-fenced area to make it even larger than it is now?
Yes, I would.
Okay.
Significantly.
Okay.
And there are a lot of groves, so I wouldn't be opposed to having fewer of them in a larger area.
Well, as I understand, those are all proposed groves, Chris. They're not the the Lime Groves, not all those spots would necessarily be utilized in the plan. Those are just places you're looking at the moment.
Yeah, those are places we've identified as having enough room and being located near where we think. But they do have to go through the process to be approved by our principal traffic engineer. So all the engineering aspects of it. But this is, what Lime has brought to us for their proposal. And now we're looking at all the specific areas, creating drawings of them, and then they would need to be approved. They could also vary in size. Just to give you a little bit of context, a rectangle about the size of a traditional parking spot would hold generally 15 to 20 Lime scooters, if depending on how well they're parked within that rectangle. So there's some that may be smaller. I don't think we would have anything larger than what would be kind of a parking spot size, but some of them will need to fit them. I think the most important thing we have to realize is that, as people go to end their trips and they see they're in a mandatory parking zone, a lot of times they'll just go right outside of it and park. So they can park it anywhere. And that's what we really want to control, so that along the borders of it, we have sufficient parking that's visible and available, so that, we don't get bad parking. But
yeah, that's kind of my concept with kind of expanding. I think we need to expand the mandatory parking zone, but then expand it enough so that you don't want to just walk 20 feet to where you're going. You expand it, if you're taking it to Boulder High, I take it a bubble far enough that you're going to want to still take it and park it in a right spot, not just park on the border and dump it wherever you want. So I think that's why you expand the mandatory parking zone so much that you then end up parking it in the right spot and not dropping it wherever you want, just out, right on the cusp. So I think you make the mandatory parking zone that much bigger. And I'd say the same thing for if you can go to the slow zone one. After having enough experiences with these myself and with bikes and stuff, I wouldn't mind having no bikes on more sidewalks and expanding that slow zone to basically match the mandatory parking zone to a degree. There are so many pedestrians down there that I would say that there might be some minor nuance to this, but really if you're in the slow zone is caged. And I don't know the exact map of caged, but there's only the benefits are that we got this micro mobility and stuff, but the dangers of having this many people walking and having these things zipping around, you're still able to go, you're still able to take it, you can still park it, but you get slowed down in a wide place.
No, that's great feedback. And we kind of consider that for Uni Hill to be make Uni Hill a whole slow zone as well.
Yeah, I think everything I'm looking at here should kind of be a slow zone, but all the way down, the slow zone should be all of the bike path, because Boulder High's right there. All of the bike path should be a slow zone, up and down, or maybe there's nuances to this, but
okay.
That's what you're saying, Don, maybe with the exception of something like Broadway, where there are stoplights and traffic signals. Having a slow zone on Broadway would probably slow down one of our major throughways.
Well, I'd say that's they shouldn't be allowed on Broadway. In a way, there's so many streets for bikes, no bikes, no scooters on Broadway.
Yeah, no, I don't think we'd want anybody riding Lime scooters on the road on Broadway.
But certainly the sidewalks.
Yeah, sidewalks, yes. So there are, when we went through council, we developed an iconograph called Which Wheels Go Where. And it basically is to educate people when and where they can use a scooter. One of those is, scooters are allowed on all our multi-use path systems. They are only allowed on sidewalks if there's not an adjacent on-street bike lane. But for us, it's really about the width of the sidewalk. Very narrow sidewalks, we don't want scooters on if there's an adjacent bike facility on the road. A nice wide path like along much of Broadway, the sidewalk is at probably about 12 feet. That would be a safe place to ride, because we certainly want them on road on Broadway, because there are no bike facilities, through the town on Broadway, through the downtown.
And similar with like how bikes, like if there's no one around, or if roads are, generally the unwritten rule of bikes, or maybe it is written, is like if you're on like a residential street, you can go 2 abreast or 3 abreast, and you can AKA block traffic, where people can go around you, but it's a slow street. If it's a busy street, you got to go single file. Can we do something like that too with?
So that may fall under some existing rules around just vehicles in the road. So that I think scooters may already fall under those rules of being single file in bike lanes, for example.
Same thing on bike paths. Like if they're in bike paths, I don't want to have to come across 3 of them, come zipping along and have to like.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure of our rules on the multi-use path system. We should certainly allow, 2 people to bike next to each other. And the other thing is, we know there's the level of enforcement on our multi-use path system is pretty low, almost non-existent. So there's that issue, that we always face as well.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'm talking more the sidewalks.
Yeah, and the wide sidewalks in the downtown, like on.
Yeah, so like, getting packs of these coming, I have my stepson crashed, wiped out, taken out other people, I'm trying to minimize like the packs of them. I don't want any of them anywhere downtown. That is my bias. So I'm trying to make it so that if they're around, they are limited.
And they're
So going back to,
Yep.
And so going back to both Susan and Justin had questioned about the proposed spots, and I don't think that we really fully answered it. There were like 50 spots located there. You're not proposing that they all end up happening.
No.
Those are just where out of those 50-ish that we saw, 12 of them end up happening.
They were thinking around 20 in the downtown and 12 on Uni Hill. They thought, based on what they're seeing in other cities of similar sizes that have mandatory parking zones, you have to have enough to make it convenient, or else people just, like you said, they just go right outside the geofence, and then you've got clutter all over the place. We want them to go into the mandatory parking zone and use the mandatory parking zone areas, the lime groves. That's really the behavior that we want. And so you have to have a good amount of them, and located in those areas where you think they're going to be entering and then needing to stop and park. So, but I think, as I said, this is going to be an iterative process. We're going to put some out there, and if they're not utilized, we can get rid of them. If we see a bunch of scooters parked just on the edge of a geofence, then we can say, wow, we probably need a lime grove in this area, so we can get, change that behavior. And we're going to do a lot of data collection, a lot of observation to make sure that over time we get that right. We know we're not going to get it right the first time.
How much is Lime paying for these parking spots?
So they're paying for all the installation, and then the city receives 15 cents a ride. That is the agreement. So they get a revocable permit for the space. They pay for all the installation, maintenance of it, and then the city receives 15 cents a ride.
Do they also pay for disassembly? Should they go out of business or move one?
Yes, I believe that's in their contract. And that's why we're really trying to keep it minimized to paint and delineators. We have considered the possible need for some wayfinding signage. But that I think will be a phased approach as well. Just like we did for B-cycle stations, occasionally we decided we better put up some signage like, hey, B-cycle stations around the corner this way.
And so this isn't a public comment time, I believe, but we do have a public comment, and since it may not be public comment time, I will ask some of the question on my behalf. So what happens if they do just drop it in a grove?
Okay. So if they're in a mandatory parking zone and they park it improperly, they do not end their trip, and they'll continue to get charged. So I think they'll quickly realize that it's not worth it to do that.
So it's more of a
essentially
punishment than a
their trip
prevention.
doesn't end until it's parked properly in a lime grove, if they're stopping their trip within a mandatory parking zone.
So it is more of a punishment than a preventative in that kind of way, because like if someone drops it in the middle of a curb cut where someone needs it to get their wheelchair through or something, it's still there. They may be getting charged, they're getting a fine, but like that's all they get, is like they just have to pay.
Yep. Yeah, we do have 3 ways in which people can contact Lime. We do say that people, if they want things taken care of quickly and efficiently, to contact Lime directly. If there's an improperly parked scooter, they find a scooter in a tree, or if there's just one that needs to be moved or rebalanced, they can text Lime, they can call Lime, they can send Lime an email, they can send a picture, text a picture of to Lime, and Lime, generally their response is around 20 minutes to get out and fix any issue. And we really want people to contact Lime directly when they have an issue. They're required to keep track of those and let us know of all those incidents that they receive. We do have, even during the pilot, we did have complaints that would come in. If they go directly to Lime, they get out there and fix them as fast as they can. And that's the most efficient way to do it. Some people contact the city and, it may take 24 hours before the email gets to the right person. And, by that time, that scooter's probably been used 3 times. So
can we add this to the, like, whatever that thing is, the app that reports potholes? Can we add it to that app so that if someone
It's
goes there to
already
report
added.
a Lime, it's already, it's there already.
Yep, and it's on our FAQ page. We're in the process of updating the FAQ page, but how to report an incident, how to report improperly parked scooter, dangerous, anything like that is it's in the app itself for Lime, but it's also in our Inquirer Boulder. If someone tries to do an Inquirer Boulder, they'll immediately get a response. Please contact Lime. Here are 3 ways to contact Lime. This is the best way to, most effectively remedy the issue.
And then,
Is there an evaluation period for this whole program?
Yes, so we collect a huge amount of data. DRCOG, the Denver Regional Council of Governments, actually pays for a system called Ride Report, which is continuously collecting data and evaluating performance of both the scooter program, and we're soon going to have B-Cycle on the Ride Report as well. So this is a great thing that DRCOG pays for our kind of regional micro mobility program. The contract with Lime has very specific triggers and thresholds about performance, about responding to issues, about when or when they could increase or when they have to decrease the number of scooters in their fleet. And we also collect data on all injuries involving the scooters. We had 115,000 rides during the pilot program, and we recorded, had 4 reports of serious injury out of those 115,000 rides. But we collect all that information and monitor it.
if there are problem people who do routinely drop it somewhere or ride too in a dangerous manner. I guess it's speed limited, but if they're like, can people's accounts be suspended?
I think that Lime does have that ability to do that. In fact, we have contacted specific users in the past. We did have a gentleman who uses a mobility device, and in his neighborhood, he was facing some issues with scooters being parked on the sidewalk and he couldn't get around them. And we actually figured out which users those were, contacted them and asked them to not leave their scooters on, where he needs to go to access RTD and his via rides. So we do have the ability to do that.
Other commissioners, do you have general pro or con feelings towards Lime downtown in the big picture?
Well, I was on your same side, Don, but I like the rollout process here. And I think it's worth doing. So like everything I'm seeing with the ability to change as needed.
Yeah, I agree with Justin. Generally not a fan, which is why I'd like to see the zones expanded, but you guys have thought through all this stuff really well, so I can see that.
How long is this contract, or at what point can we just say, no, I have a kind of a one strike, you're out kind of approach to this.
Yeah.
And so like if it's like done, I want to be able to say, no, you're done, out of here.
Yeah, so when we went through an RFQ process to identify both B-Cycle and Lime as our providers for micromobility, I believe at the time it was it's a 1-year contract with up to a 3-year renewal time period. So like for Lime, we are in year 2 of that. We are negotiating the contract right now. And then so each year we can, if there are significant issues, safety issues, we can, it's only a year-long contract. And after 3 years, we can do a full evaluation to see whether or not we want to continue our relationship with that provider.
Let me examine what you just said. Are we in for 3 years then, or is it in year by year? Or
It's
after
year
3
by
years,
year.
we can renegotiate the whole deal, but
Yeah.
year by year.
It's year by year with the option of renewing for 3 years before we have to basically do a new agreement if we want to. So it allows us to, if they're performing well, we don't have to go through a big contracting process to get them into year 2 and then into year 3.
Understood. Are there laws on the books that would, if people are doing stupid stuff, so it's not just on the Lime side, can you be issued a ticket for any of this?
Yeah, I mean, if you violate any of our traffic laws, you could certainly receive a citation. I don't know. I don't think we had any reported citations other than those that may have been associated with those injury crashes. But I don't recall seeing any others, just kind of related to, reckless operation or anything. I don't recall seeing any citations for that. But there is the ability to do it.
Generally see that highly tracked anyways. Is this going to come back to us? I don't want to say, sounds good, we hope you make all these changes, go ahead. Do we get a second review?
Yeah, so I think prior to launch date and prior to installation of the actual Lime groves, the painting and the delineators, we can certainly return to this commission and say, here are the 18 locations we settled on, and we've expanded the mandatory parking zone in this way, and we've created a larger slow zone, so we can certainly return prior to launch date, but I'm not sure, how that will fall with your meetings. It may have to be a special communication. I'm not sure if you meet monthly
or every other month, then I think we would be okay. This is something I am passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
And I will make time to, if something comes up that's out of schedule, to keep things moving, let us know. If we said no, does this stop? Do we have the power to say, this isn't working, we're pulling the plug?
Chris Jones, I don't know if, I'm not sure of the legal authority of the commissions.
You do not have that type of authority to say no, but you certainly do have leverage in the sense of communication with council of what the Downtown Management Commission would recommend for something that would influence future agreements.
And I'll just say, you know, I want, you know, your input is valuable. You know, you work and know the business owners and people who are operating downtown. We want this to be, you know, successful. We want it to be effectively managed. We want it to be safe. You know, so we're looking for your input, especially that we know it's gonna take time to get it right. We're not, you know, when we lay out these lime groves the first time, we may learn and say, well, we've got to change this one's not working. And so it's that process and your input and the input from, you know, business community downtown is going to be critical to that. You know, we want it to help business. We want it to provide a way that people can go and spend money and get tax revenue for the city, but do it in a really safe and efficient manner without driving.
Maybe one last question I have is, the downtown ambassadors do such a great job. Can they be given some sort of special E-code pass to, like, say, yeah, mine's 20 minutes, maybe the ambassadors can like do something now if they just see one or whatever. Can we make it so the ambassadors have some sort of account to move it if they need to?
I think we can certainly look into that. You know, I think anybody, if they see a scooter knocked over, blocking an ADA ramp, you know, I would encourage anybody to just pick it up and, you know, and get it out of the way. So, but if we did have ambassadors who are specifically looking out for that and also helping people, you know, a lot of users of scooters are visitors. And so helping, being knowledgeable of, oh, you're looking for a lime grove, there's one, you know, 2 blocks over that way. That type of information would be great, since we know that, you know, a high number of users are visitors.
Yeah, I could see the ambassadors. Yeah, I know Anna's here still, like having the ambassadors have like a little card with like the parking spots in their pocket too, or app on their phone or whatever. But yeah, I agree. If anyone drops one in a bad place, I will chuck it in the trash gladly for them.
Yeah. But I really appreciate your time and consideration and input, and you know, we'll get information out any way we can. If it's between meetings, we can still provide that in some type of communication to you and receive your feedback from it.
Great. Anything else, Justin and Susan?
We're all good.
Nope.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris, for your time.
All right,
Let
thanks.
us move on to we've done gate list. Now we're at the budget.
Yes, thank you. We have Teresa Finkel here, our Senior Manager of Business Services and District Vitality, or Economic Vitality, to present the staff preliminary budget that we've developed internally to bring to you today. We hope is reflective of many of the conversations we've been having related to DMC's priorities, specifically for CAGID. A draft of our budget has been prepared internally and will be moving forward to council, but want to make sure that you all have an opportunity to review and approve prior to going to council. So over to Teresa.
Great. Just quickly going through the agenda, we'll touch on kind of the roles, responsibilities, and priorities of the General Improvement District, talk to 2024 budget, both from a community vitality standpoint as well as CAGID specific. Run through any questions and then look at some suggested motion language as Chris just described. So in this first section, again, I just wanted to highlight the roles, responsibilities of the General Improvement District, and for you as commissioners, looking at what our priorities are for the upcoming year and then key accomplishments that have been achieved thus far. So quickly on the GID roles and responsibilities, we have the opportunity to provide parking and related improvement. And that's one of the big keys that KJID is providing. We improve access through the district's provision of the transportation options, maintain and repair public assets located within the district, and improve the overall health and welfare of the area. So that kind of creates the context for which our budget is built on. As you guys provided wonderful feedback through our retreat, we've identified the following DMC priorities, including making sure that KJID is safe and welcoming, having post-COVID transfer strategic partnerships, public space activations, and then looking at that long-term investment and planning to make sure that this is a great place for many years to come. I just wanted to highlight, and we talked through some of these in our last meeting, but some key accomplishments that I think are really important to note. The investor program did hit the end of its pilot phase, and we were successful in extending that because of the great success that we saw there. We're excited to see some new improvements coming in on the downtown and within the Pearl Street Mall. So we've started the installation of new water filling stations. We've had a number of improvements from painting, power washing, some replacement of bricks that are deteriorating. So just a lot of things that the department's been working on to make sure that Pearl Street Mall stays a beautiful asset for many years to come. We've also been excited to see second picture down on the left there is a rendering of the proposed art for the 1100 Spruce Garage. So we did go through a procurement process to select the artist for that. That'll be really exciting. And we continue to build on partnerships with CU, the Downtown Board Partnership, and the bid. As was spoken of earlier, we're excited to see new activations coming and new experiments with how do we activate spaces, make them safe, make our area, and again, making that an accessible place for the people of Boulder with the Boulder Social Street activations. And then we're also in our second round of outdoor dining, which has been a great success. It's fun to see people out in those parklets and enjoying their meals. And then we are also undertaking a number of garage repairs, which we're really excited to be getting moving forward and keeping those assets in good repair. As we look at the 2024 budget, just wanted to spend another second. I know we went through the budget process last time, but we'll talk a little bit about the community vitality budget and some of the general overall enhancements that the budget proposal includes, and that's going to be on the department-wide level. And then we'll go through, I know there was some good detail in the packet about capital improvement, and then looking at the specifics for the KJID revenues and expenses as budget highlights for 2024. I'll run through these quickly. So we, since we did take the time in our last meeting to kind of review, but right now we are in this budget, the citywide budget development, and we'll be moving into the review by council and adoption here as we go through the end of the summer into the fall. And again, here we are in July, and just on the heels of having our executive budget team review the proposals that were sent out, that'll take us over to council review and then adoption. I just wanted to give a little bit of context for the entire community vitality budget. So we have a number of different funds, and this kind of goes to your question, Susan. We have 4 general improvement districts that make up the community vitality budget. So KJID is one of those 4, which is a dedicated revenue stream, unique mill levy. And then outside of that, we've got the University Hill General Improvement District, the Beachhead Parking District out of Boulder Junction, and the Boulder Junction TDM, the Transportation and Van Management. And then within the department, we also, just as of the end of last year and the beginning of this year, we have the special events and arts and culture work groups as part of our department, and those are general fund programs. So we do receive funding from the general fund. And then also just wanted to highlight, we do have some other funds that we're looking forward to utilizing for really great purposes, including the ARPA funds. And then our arts and culture side, there's community culture, resilience and safety tax changes. But so that's just kind of a snapshot of the multiple different funding sources that we have within the department to manage and utilize to bring about really great things. Just high level on the revenue side, the majority of the revenue is parking related. So we have management stewardship over not only our parking garages, which is really central to Cage's roles responsibility, but also the on-street parking enforcement piece of that. The revenue piece actually is general fund revenue, so we don't see that directly, but we contribute to that. Property tax, obviously from our general improvement district mill levies, obviously the Caged leases that we have stewardship over, specific ownership tax, and then there's some other revenues and transfers. And on the expense side, personnel operating, internal services, debt service, and capital transfer. And just context, the internal services are going to be things like repair and maintenance funds that were being set aside each year for future replacement, computer replacement, fleet services, those types of elements. And then the transfers are going to include our administration cost allocation. So if we're receiving services from other city departments, so legal support, GIS support, those types of things are bundled into those. Just a quick snapshot of this department-wide budget. We do have just a very slight decrease in our overall operating budget when you exclude capital. Part of that has to do with some of the operational changes that we're seeing with gateless and not having certain services needed because of that transition. And then when we look at capital, we do have some fairly ambitious goals coming up. We're excited to really dig in. I think see some really great improvements happen. And so when we look, 2023 approved capital was about 3.4 million this year, or 2024 is up to 5.2 million. And so that creates an overall increase of about 75% to the entire department budget.
And that's CIP for all of the districts. So that includes a $2 million program for the 14th Street lot at University Hill.
Yes, well, so that's that particular value is going to be, it's in 2025, but the 2024 proposed does include all of 2025 or 2024 projects. And we've got the detail of that here in a minute. And again, these are budget enhancements that are across the entire department, so not specific necessarily to Caged, but there are implications. We've made a request for repurposing of one of our access services coordinator positions, which has been historically a customer service position, to be able to support all of our great commissions. So not only do we have the 4 general improvement commissions, but we also have the arts commission with the inclusion of that work group. And looking at some of our needs with special events, we are looking to repurpose a one-time fixed term position for helping to develop and build that special events program. And that would be coming from, and again, going back to one of your questions earlier, Susan, there is a general fund transfer that comes into Caged, and that money is used for a number of purposes. About 300,000 historically has been used for supporting the eco passes within Caged, and then other funding has been used for other elements. And so we're proposing a transfer of a certain portion of that for that special events position. Again, with our arts and culture work group, the community cultural plan, they're in a cycle ready for a revamp of that. And so that request is in. Again, from feedback from all of you, the Downtown Ambassador program has been a great success, and we are looking to have that re-upped again in this new year. And then we also have the great work of AMPS, the access management parking strategy, and continuing the work that has been done with continued funding now that we've had some of the great studies. So as we dive into the Caged budget specific in this, I know it's a little bit small, but it is in your packet. We're looking at a slight decrease overall in revenues. And I just wanted to clarify that this is really more of an alignment with actuals. And more so than anything to be concerned about with changes. I think some of the budgets historically have been a little bit high, and so just kind of bringing it back to reality. The good news is we are seeing rebounds in all areas in terms of parking revenue, getting back to that pre-pandemic level. We haven't quite hit that yet, but we do see that growth trend. So that's really good news for the district. On the expense side, as I mentioned, we do see some slight operational decreases due to primarily this transition to gateless. And so the good news on that is the intent is to offset some of the transaction fee subsidies that we've talked about with Sam over the last 2 meetings will even out, and we'll find ourselves in hopefully a revenue neutral place with those subsidies with this gateless transition. As was mentioned, we also do see that debt service retiring here in August. And so creates a new space and opportunity to look forward to the future and where we're headed with that. I'm going to pop real quick over to, this just gives us a kind of a snapshot of proposed revenue expenses. Again, the majority of the revenue coming into Caged is related to parking revenue. The next smallest or the next largest portion is your property tax, and a few other slices of pie there. And again, the majority of our expenses are coming from operations and personnel. So going back to Chris's question and comment, this gives the snapshot of our proposed capital improvement program through 2029. So it is a 2024 to 2029 program. All of the lines that are highlighted are related to Caged. So Caged does make up about 95% of our capital improvement program, primarily because that's where our assets primarily lie. We do have some work within our UGID General Improvement District, which is that 2.5 million of reinvestment for the 14th Street lot that's contemplated in 2025. And then we've got some capital planning dollars for our Boulder Junction districts as well. And then the 1% for public art supports the community cultures, resilience and safety tax. That is a 0.3% tax that's been re-upped by voter approval. And so making sure that we're able to integrate public art in some of the new capital projects. So the big ones that I would highlight here are we do have the need to do some work in our garages. So that's going to be the majority of it. We've gotten ourselves off to a really good start. There is some deferred maintenance that we're getting our arms around, and it's going really well. The St. Julian Hotel has been identified as a really good candidate for a new traffic coding. That's a fairly robust process that will help secure most of the work that we're currently doing this year, so that we're not seeing those repairs over and over. We also are at a phase where we're looking to reduce some fire suppression repair in the 1500 Pearl Garage. So those are some of the biggest ticket items. We also have a couple of staircases that are needing some TLC over at 1100 Spruce and St. Julian. We're also excited to introduce a proposal for power line undergrounding within the district from primarily a safety perspective, and then also aesthetics to make sure that we've got those under control where we can. There are great opportunities to leverage funds through Excel. So it's a really great time to be able to, I think, take advantage of the retiring debt and add a little bit more investment to that particular project.
Does Excel speak in the cost of that at all?
Because I don't know if you wanted to.
Yeah, I wish I knew the exact number, but they've been setting money aside for some time. But it does require the city to provide some matching dollars. And so Caged is in a position where we could leverage those dollars to make something happen.
I see that as $500,000 every year. Is that's in Caged for maintenance? I mean, once we underground it.
It's section by section. So there is a fairly hefty cost to get them underground.
Right.
But so the intent would be to just tackle a section by section, just to be realistic about what work can be accomplished each year.
Gotcha.
The other thing that I will point out, because I think it is important, and I'm excited on the capital and maintenance assessment of assets project. We are back in 2017, the Farnsworth report, it was put together. It's a parking strategy document to basically inventory all of our parking garages. We're getting to a point where we're ready to get that revised and updated, kind of create some continuity in our tracking systems to make sure that regular maintenance is happening. And what we're really moving towards is a avoiding as much as possible any kind of emergency repairs and really getting us into a good state of repair for our buildings. That's requiring less and less of those emergency fixes. And so that's one of the tools that we're using is this new analysis. And then once we identify projects, looking at creating really good relationships where we're pulling in both design and contractors at the same time, that CMCG concept, which basically brings the contractors into to the table when we start talking about the design of some of our projects. And so we don't get halfway through the design of a project, get to an RFP, and then find out that the contractor is going to run into these unknowns or hidden issues. So really excited to increase the efficiency of our capital projects, in particular with our structures. As we move into some of just kind of the budget highlights for Pages specifically, as I mentioned, the revenues were relying based on historic actuals. We have followed the historic trend within Caged of permit increases for parking permits every other year. So this year was a constant year. So 2024, the proposal is to increase those parking permits $10 from $480 to $490. And then we'll see an increase proportionally the same on our surface lots from $278 to $285. As I mentioned, that general fund transfer, we'll see a slight decrease due to repurposing of those funds to support our general or special events work group. And again, our tenant spaces, we have primarily on a 3% escalation. So we'll see a slight increase there. Overall, we're anticipating about 172,000 decrease in operations, and that's primarily due to the vendors that we will no longer need as we transition to gateless and some of the maintenance elements associated with gates, tickets, 24/7 on-call service. And then going back again to one of the points we talked about a little bit earlier is we have seen a discrepancy in what the actual EcoPass contract has turned out to be versus what the historic budget has been. And so we've identified a few elements right now based on all of your input to really put some focus and energy into, and that includes downtown safety enhancements and looking at different tree planting and landscaping opportunities within Caged. And then as was mentioned, Commutify pilots. So the Commutify platform is a multi-mobility tool that could help us reach a greater audience or just provide another avenue to make sure that we're providing those transportation options and helping to meet the goals of the department and of the GID. And then as I mentioned, we'll see a decrease on that security debt.
So one point I wanted to make on the anticipated EcoPass repurpose, this is something Steffi and I discussed with Chris when we had our opposite month agenda planning meeting. Both Stephanie and I felt that the DMC would put our money where our mouth was to support safety enhancements, whether it's supporting the day center or anything. And so is that the $200K downtown safety enhancements?
Yes.
And so I just wanted to bring Susan and Justin up to speed. Safety is one of our main priorities. And so we directed Chris at that meeting to look for ways to allocate budget towards increased safety. Does $200K make a dent? What does that get us?
So we are relating that to the suggested support, not just in that meeting, but we have talked in previous commission meetings around more support for the downtown Boulder ambassadors. So we didn't want to say specifically downtown Boulder ambassadors because we want to leave some flexibility in the types of things that we would want to support, but that is one avenue that we could go with a portion of those dollars. In the event that we spend $200,000 in 3 months in 2024, then we can always have another conversation about identifying other monies. But based on what I've heard from the Downtown Boulder Partnership on their needs for additional support for ambassadors, if that's something that the commission would like to do, this does allow for that, and it leaves room for other things to explore. And those things could include some conversations around cameras in stairwells and so infrastructure type safety enhancements. There are other places that we could go, but this is a result of that conversation in the meetings that we've had in support of investors.
Great. I thought we were already supporting the ambassadors. So is this in addition to the support we were already doing?
The general fund pays for the city's portion of the Downtown Boulder Ambassador Program. CAGED, this to date has not contributed any dollars to the Ambassador Program.
So does this grow the program, or does this just, in a way, a transfer? It's now not coming out of the general fund, it's coming out of ours, so there's no actual increase in funding for safety.
This is a grow of the program. So essentially the city's contribution, depending on what, so right now the general fund contribution to ambassadors is $372,000 a year. Depending on where we go with this 200K, it would be incremental on top of that.
Okay, so the general fund amount is staying the same. This would just increase it. And Communify, I didn't understand what it was. It's some new, yet another on top of RTD and VIA and Limes and stuff like. What is it?
Sure. So Communify, actually, we have been working with them for probably 5 or more years. They're the folks that led the Door to Downtown program some time ago, where there were subsidized Uber, Lyft trips from hotels around 28th and Canyon into downtown. It was targeted primarily at tourists. They've evolved it into a dynamic platform similar to a lot of health insurance or wellness programs, where you sign up and you pick the things that you're willing to do to take better care of your body, and you get incentives. So it is a tool based, it's been built in downtown Boulder, already been rolled out to a number of businesses. And there has been a pilot within CAGED for a number of years. This all rolled out right before the pandemic hit. And so as trips are returning and as RTD and the EcoPass continues to have us realize both cost savings, but those cost savings mean that less people are taking transit. How do we redeploy these resources in a way that incentivizes folks to shift trips away from single occupant vehicles? And Communify is a local company that's been doing this with large companies for some time.
I guess as a business owner in CAGED, I haven't heard of that for 5 years.
Well, now
For
you
like
have.
wellness programs and stuff like that. So interesting. Well, your next slide was questions, I think, right?
Yeah, so I know I went through a lot of that quickly, but were there any questions or clarifications I can make?
So I apologize if I never got this or I missed, but I think we had talked about getting a list of all the assets. Did that ever go out?
So I believe, Lisa, did you send that?
I did. I'm happy to resend it.
Might have just missed that, which was definitely.
Oh, it was a separate email
Yeah, and so it
on
does.
June 26th.
Got it. And I guess going forward, is there anything budgeted towards either acquiring new assets for, collection of rent and things like that, or repurposing some of our longstanding vacant assets to something that could be filled?
So within CAGED, the one thing that I will highlight is on the Affordable Commercial Capital Program. We are in the process of preparing information to go before council. We've been engaged with CU over the last few months in developing, they basically pulled together a lot of research and information about how affordable commercial has rolled out within the city of Boulder to date. and then proposed a pilot program for how we could potentially increase that. And so we already have our existing leases within 1,500 Pearl and 1,100 Spruce, which will be on that email that was just referenced. But so what that program is, and so of course invite you to listen into that council meeting, is of the proposal of having a master lease that the city would hold, or that Acacia would hold, and then allow for affordable tenants spaces within that. So that would be an example of something that's in the pipeline for that. I don't know, Chris, if there's anything else you want to add.
Sure, I'd say that, yeah, that's our current strategy around how do we support the downtown business community and think about some of the challenges that folks have been having with being able to continue doing business downtown. On a broader level, I harken back to the 1960s when the plan for downtown was being established. And the plan for downtown was not just 4 blocks of pedestrian mall. It was an entire downtown plan that identified specific parcels where the city should own somebody needs to own and construct all of the parking requirements for the long-term success of the downtown. And that's what established, CAGID was established to purchase those parcels that were all identified in a citywide plan. There are no current citywide plans that suggest that we need to be doing more of that. It doesn't mean that there won't. So there might be some opportunities to have that conversation. I think particularly around the civic area master plan, where there are city-owned parcels that are within the CAGID boundary that might be really strategic access related locations for making sure that part of our downtown can be more successful. That needs to be part of a bigger conversation where CV, as much as we're proud of the work that we do, we are not necessarily empowered to just go out and wheel and deal and buy parcels or anything like that. But we are the stewards of these resources that you all help advise us on where we should be going and reinvesting and making sure that all of our downtown can be as successful as possible. And I see that as an upcoming conversation where there very well may be an ask through that process that includes council, many other departments and the community in a suggestion that maybe AGID and C should take on ownership and responsibility for the access related elements of the future of the civic area. So nothing certainly programmed yet. That would probably be the next big opportunity to say, hey, maybe it makes sense for CAGID to take ownership of a parcel and do something with it. That would translate, it's not just a parking garage, because we don't just do parking garages, but a building that happens to have parking and city-owned or district-owned retail spaces attached to it.
And I guess that's what I was wondering about the 100,000 every year going towards that capital program, like what we're planning on doing with that, I suppose.
Yeah. Okay.
And I'm so glad you brought it up. And we are in the process of developing some materials that we're taking to the city council as the board of directors of the Central Area General Improvement District to make sure that in the work plan that we're developing, that we're headed down a path that they would like us to head down, which will certainly include conversations with you all before we actually physically start spending those dollars. This $100,000 per year is a holdover from Yvette Days. Originally, I think she was targeting investment in properties, retail spaces that we already owned that maybe were not occupied at the level that we were hoping. We don't have a lot of vacancy. I think we've just got one space. Yeah, and it's upstairs and it's not that large and second floor spaces around all downtowns, are suffering. We have investigated whether or not we would want to put a bathroom in that space so that folks don't have to walk through the parking garage to get to the restrooms that the rest of our tenants use in that building. We haven't prioritized that and we could, if the commission all said right now that yes, I think that's a valid way to spend our resources to rough in a bathroom in that space to make it more viable. But we haven't prioritized that because we've been wanting to take this larger approach to why we do what we do instead of just trying to make that one space more marketable.
And I mean, that answers another question I had. It was referenced, doing some renovations to that space anyway, and what that.
We do have another vacancy yet. So there's a vacancy upstairs and there is the recent vacancy at the architecture space. Do we have any updates on whether or not CBRE has been able to recruit anybody for that space?
They're actively recruiting, but at this point, they haven't had any options that they brought forward to us, but I am hopeful that they will gain a little bit more. I know right now we're in the midst of some of our garage repairs, which has kind of made it less of a priority, but once we're able to get those construction crews out of that area, then definitely something that it is on the market and being marketed actively currently. Great. Any other questions?
I have a question. No more garage repairs after. We're just gonna tear them all down.
No, and so what we're trying to do right now is kind of bring some reality and cohesiveness to kind of our approach to repair and management. So the hope is that instead of the emergency maintenance pieces that we need, it's going to be more coming in on an annual basis through our garage repairs. And then as we get a little bit further out, we'll be able to reassess. And since this is an annual capital improvement plan that gets projected out for 6 years, we're able to make adjustments where we need to.
Yeah.
See that particular line item project might retire, but there will be other ones to replace.
Yes.
I know the fire department, when they come inspect my buildings, they don't like fire suppression stuff because it actually, or maybe it's one of the inspectors, they're like, wish you just didn't have it because more often it leaks than it helps with any fire. Are we required to have fire suppression, I imagine, at 1500 Pearl?
Right now, it's all in the subterranean levels and the above ground levels, we don't. But I'm not sure the logistics of the regulations for that. But there is a system that exists currently and was evaluated and recommended for replacement.
So I'd imagine at the time that the buildings were constructed, or that one in particular, that it was done because it's required. I don't know that those regulations have changed. And this is replacement, not putting in a new one. There might be an element of the fact that it's a garage with vehicles that oftentimes, and we have had fires in many of our buildings, not necessarily always associated with vehicles, but with folks behaving badly, being a public building that is open 24/7. It's easy for folks to get in and decide they want to use it in ways that were not intended. And we have had issues with leaking and freezing and all of those things. So if we didn't have to do it, I wouldn't mind not having to do it, but I'm not sure that that's a direction that we're able to go.
Okay, I just wanted to ask if we could just just turn the water off and kill the system.
We can always pose the question. I do have a meeting with the fire chief in the not too distant future, so.
I guess it's an easy enough question to ask, but if you want it, that's a different issue. If you think it's worth having, that's the real question, not can we get rid of it? If you think we need it, then we need it.
Any other questions? Great. And so similar to our public hearing, we would love to be able to have a motion if you all are comfortable with recommending or approving the recommended budget. We have some suggested approval language.
I move the commission recommends the approval of the 2024 Community Vitality proposed budget to include the 2024 capital improvement plan.
2029.
2029.
Oh, yeah, should say 2029. Yes, that.
I'll second that.
I'm in favor.
All right. Sounds unanimous.
Yeah.
Great. Well, we will make sure that is recorded and passed on to council with unanimous approval. With that, we can move on to our commissioner recruitment update.
My
It's me.
apologies, I have kid issues that I need to deal with, so I need to jet. But I did send to Lisa, I'm doing this out of order just to get my quick update. I sent to Lisa my updates for the top priorities for our group. I just sent it here. I was hoping to just go through it, but I have to go. So I sent that to Lisa. I can see that we added one thing to it already. If I leave, we have no more quorum.
That is true. This is our last item. We can just share, we had one applicant. They were not eligible, so we have 0 applicants for our one vacant seat. The recruitment is going to reopen. Did we get a date?
Their council's going to discuss at their special meeting this Thursday. They're going to discuss the option to extend.
To reopen, and so we can continue to recruit. Those are all of our items. We can bring the top priorities back at our next meeting.
Great. I did talk to another commission, and they have some of these presentations that are done live here, pre-recorded, so that the commissioners are able to spend more time talking and less time in being presented to, which I love being able to like have the live dynamic back and forth. But if these are already being pre-recorded, maybe for other commissions, would this be a way to save time from having, that people might still need to come for Q&A, puts a little bit more onus on the commissioners to watch those videos in advance. But I wanted to see if Susan and Justin had any thoughts on trying to move maybe more to that direction so that we could talk more.
I would prefer more homework, but only if that's an easier option, I suppose, for the presenters.
Yeah, I would be fine with it. But I do think the question and answer time is
It's
valuable.
important.
Yep, definitely. So Chris, you know what's going on in the bigger picture and with other commissions. I'm always looking for efficiencies. When I saw that we were spending 67 grand to move one person in to help with all these commissions and stuff, I'm trying to not make things harder, but also make us more effective, because we've cut out the police, we keep running out of time.
Sure, I'd say that it's a strategy that makes a ton of sense if we're given the same presentation over and over again, which we've tried not to do. It's something I can take back to the team and make sure that they know that it's an option for them if they want to just record their presentations. I'd say that both Sam and Teresa probably could have easily done that and then shared that a little bit in advance. The key question is how far in advance do we need to make sure that we're in a position to be ready to do those things? So sometimes the materials that we're sharing are hot off the presses, and so we don't have necessarily the space in our timelines to get everything prepared and recorded and to you with enough time to get your homework done.
I understand.
A week. So certainly something that we can add to the list of strategies for getting information across to you all to make sure that everyone's time is getting used efficiently.
Great. Also, for next time, I think we need to do the voting of our positions, but hopefully we're all there. So we don't vote Stephanie as chair. Not here.
All right, we will make sure that elections are added to the next agenda.
But I do like that. I've seen other commissions that kind of rotate it. So I think there's health in that.
Yeah, normally when there's a 5-person board and 5 members, each person would get a chance to be in charge at least 1 year.
Well, we do have a city council candidate in our midst, so.
Yeah, potentially. See how that goes. Yeah. So that's something to think about as well.
Can't you serve on both? No, you can't. Sorry.
Well, cool. We adjourn. My apologies for having to take off, but life calls.
All right. Right.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Thanks all. Bye-bye.